Hi everyone, it's really good to see so many people in the room. So as Dr. Walker said, my name is Nadia. I'm part of the team here at Remedium. So today we would really like to welcome you to this webinar on healing our healers. You know, you're prioritizing your mental health and well-being as a doctor. So just a little sort of introduction to who Remedium are and kind of what we do. Remedium has been around for 10 years, and our entire purpose is to help solve the NHS staffing crisis by placing permanent medical specialists into the NHS. So over these 10 years, we've placed over 3,000 permanent clinicians across over 100 NHS trusts all throughout the UK. We are based over in London, and we also have a presence in Mumbai. We work in a variety of specialties. I'm not going to explain all of them to you now, but we support international doctors at every step of the way. So that comes from matching doctors to NHS jobs, to interview preparation, all the way through to then helping you move over to the UK, supporting you through your visa processes and integrating into the country and all sorts of bits. So we essentially offer sort of an end-to-end support process for international doctors looking to move to the UK. And part of that care package means taking care of our doctors, you know, after they've moved, if they're thinking about moving here. And so obviously part of that is looking at your mental health. This is very timely as it is now Mental Health Awareness Week here in the UK. So we are partnering with Dr. Walker, who is an expert in this field, to discuss what it is like to prioritize your mental health as an international doctor. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Dr. Walker to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Welcome everybody to tonight's webinar. I hope you are well and comfortable wherever you're calling in from today. I know we've got people listening in from around the world. You're all very, very welcome to this webinar on how to prioritise your mental health as an international doctor. My name is Dr. Caroline Walker, and I'll be introducing myself a little bit more as we get into the webinar. I want to start though by saying that this is your time, okay? This next 45 minutes to an hour or so is absolutely all about you, and that's a really rare thing for doctors to have. I regularly work with doctors and ask, them if they've ever had a session where it was about their well-being and not the well-being of their patients, and it's very rare. So thankfully, it's becoming a bit more common, and particularly at times like this around the Mental Health Awareness Week, as Nadia just shared. So this next 45 minutes is really an opportunity for you to think about your well-being. I might be an expert in this field, but I absolutely don't know exactly what you need to be well. You know that better than I ever could. So please just sit back, relax, and just let some of the ideas wash over you. And some of them will really resonate for you and you might want to give them a try. Others might not be for you, and that's absolutely fine. Take what you like and leave the rest. And before we get going, I just wanted to say it's absolutely okay if you are struggling at any time to get some help. There's lots and lots of help out there now for struggling doctors. And I think this webinar is not meant to be in place of that. So towards the end of the webinar, I will be signposting some avenues of support where you can access help if you need it. So please do that if you need to. What we're going to cover tonight. So we're going to start with a little bit about why self-care is so important as an international doctor in particular. And we're going to then move on and think about some of the most common challenges that are faced by international doctors and some of my top tips for how to manage those. And there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. But equally, if you're here with us watching this live and you've got any questions, please do feel free to pop them in the chat. I might not be able to get around to all of them, but I will try and answer as many as possible as we go along. So before we get into the content of tonight's webinar, I really wanted to share with you a bit of my own story, if I may. So I was one of those kids that wanted to be a doctor from when I was very, very young, about 5 3/4. Actually, my mum wrote it down on a piece of paper. I said, I want to be a doctor when I grow older, but I'll have to be a nurse because I'm a girl. Now, luckily, my mum was a kind of shoulder padded wearing woman of the 80s, and she soon put me right. She said I could do anything I put my mind to. So I went off on that conveyor belt. From that very young age, it was, doing well through school, off to university, off to medical school, popped out at the age of 24 here in the UK, really, excited, ready to save the world, thinking, wow, this is what I wanted to do my whole life. And I started work, and within about 4 to 6 weeks of being on the wards as a junior doctor, I was really struggling. I was really anxious. I was quite overwhelmed. I was working 100-hour weeks. It was awful. I was kind of working all day, getting home, falling asleep in my clothes, dreaming about work all night, waking up and doing it all over again. And I know many of you will have had similar experiences to that. And I'd get to work and, my bleep would go off. And by the time I went to answer the bleep had gone again. And by the time I was ringing back that, answering that bleep, it went again. And before you knew it, you were just sat there for like 10 minutes, the bleep constantly going. And all this time kind of fearing, all these sick patients out there that might be dying because I wasn't fast enough or good enough. And I'd look around me and like everyone else around me seemed to know what they were doing, and I felt like maybe I'd missed the day at medical school when they taught you how to be a doctor, and it was very, very overwhelming. And I remember one day I was sitting on a ward by a computer and I was looking up blood results, and up in front of me popped this cardiology registrar, and he said, without thinking, quite innocently, "Hey, how you doing?" And I just replied, "I'm thinking of resigning, thanks. How are you?" And there was silence. And there was this really awkward moment where we kind of both recognized that clearly something wasn't right. Clearly I was really struggling, but we were doctors, right? We don't talk about emotions and feelings, and we're British, and we just sort of kind of laughed it off a little bit. And he told me about a patient, and then he just went on his way. And I didn't really think anything of it. And I got on with my day. And later that day, he came up to me on the ward round and he handed me a little pink piece of paper. And those of you who are old enough to remember these ubiquitous pink piece of paper, which we used to request like ECGs and echoes, cardiology request forms. So he handed me this piece of paper and I thought, this is a bit weird, like him asking me to do an echo, but okay. He said, no, just read this later, put it in your pocket and read it later. And I got home that night and found this piece of pink paper in my pocket, and I opened it and I read it. And to this day, it is one of the most compassionate, wonderful letters anybody has ever written to me. It said, at the risk of embarrassing myself, I really wanted to reach out to you. I could tell that you were struggling, and I really wanted to just let you know it's really hard to be a doctor sometimes, and it's okay. It's okay to be finding it hard, and it's okay to come, I'd love to make you a cup of tea, have a chat sometime. If I can help in any way, I would really like to help. And there was a PS at the bottom of this letter, which I'll never forget. It said, as a background, in 1999, a good friend of mine, a GP registrar, died by suicide, leaving behind his wife and 3 young children. And nobody even knew that he was struggling. Nobody even knew. And I think that for me was the moment that I first realized that as doctors, as healthcare professionals, we can really struggle to look after our own well-being. And when we do struggle, we can often find it hard to come forward for the help and support that we need. And it was also a moment, though, that I realized that what helps a doctor who might be struggling or going through a challenging time is not necessarily a big, fancy intervention. Often it is these moments of simple human connection and kindness that make all the difference. And that, for me, that cardiology registrar reaching out, offering me a cup of tea, I went and had that cup of tea, we had a chat. It was the beginning of a journey for me of getting the help and support I needed. And it was also the beginning of a lifelong interest and passion for doctors and their well-being. And I went on to specialise in psychiatry and then in psychotherapy. And then since the last 6 years or so, I've been working full-time in the field of doctors' well-being. I set up an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation here in the UK that does work internationally as well, called The Joyful Doctor. And we are just dedicated to improving the well-being of doctors. And if you're ever feeling like you might be the only one that's struggling, please know that there are approximately 10 million doctors in the world today. And at any one time this year, approximately 2.5 million doctors will be struggling with some shape or form with their mental health. So with anxiety or a bit of low mood or stress or a bit of burnout. So please never think that you're alone. And if you're here in the UK working or thinking of coming over here, that equates to about 70,000 doctors every year. So, but as I say, there's it's not all bad news. When we get help, when we come forward and we get the support we need and we look after our mental health and well-being, we do really well. Okay, we have amazing resilience, inherent resilience, and we do really well with support. I also have some personal experience of being an international doctor. After my first year here in the UK, I went and worked abroad in Australia for a couple of years. And I remember, you know, although it was a relatively similar kind of cultural, in some ways, a similar culture to here in the UK, there was so many subtle little differences that just made it that little bit more challenging. I remember my first night shift, discovering that their cannula system was completely different to the one I'd been used to, and suddenly felt like I was, you know, day one on the job again. I also remember just some differences in things like language used or dress rules, right? We were allowed to wear flip-flops, right, at work, which was extraordinary and a good thing. But there was other things as well, like expectations of what was expected of different grades of doctor, and how different departments worked with one another, and how the system works as a whole was really quite different. And it added a whole extra layer of challenge and complexity, which I think it's really important that we don't underestimate, you know, when you're working as an international doctor in a different place, so to where you trained. And that's why we're doing this webinar tonight, to think about some of those common challenges that you might come across. As we go through the webinar, I just want to say I'm not some kind of wellbeing guru sitting on top of the hill like this guy, the Rubik's Cube all sorted out. I'm very much like you and everybody else, right? I'm jumbled up on my own journey, but I do have approximately 10 to 15 years experience now of supporting doctors with their well-being. And what I'd love to share with you tonight is some of my kind of the common themes that we see coming forward from doctors who are working in a different country to their country of birth, or their home country, or their country where they trained. And just to give you some hope as well, that it's absolutely possible to thrive and love working as a doctor in an alternative environment to the one in which you trained. So why is self-care so important? You may not be aware of this, but the Hippocratic Oath was rewritten, well, updated, I should say, a couple of years ago. And it was rewritten to include a statement of a duty to care for ourselves as doctors. Because I think over the last sort of decade or two, there's been a growing awareness of this importance of looking after ourselves, of putting our own oxygen mask on first before we fit the oxygen mask of our patients. Because we know that doctors who look after themselves, their mental and their physical health, they make fewer mistakes, we give a better standard of care, and we enjoy our work more. And I think it's really important that we recognise that we deserve to enjoy our work and to have a good and happy life. You know, often in medicine, there's this narrative of kind of always putting the patient first and sacrificing yourself. And actually, there's a lot of evidence that shows that's really important. If you look after yourself, you're going to do a better job and you're going to have a much better time. So it's really important that we do look after ourselves. So how do we do that? How do you be, can we be a joyful international doctor? Well, first thing I want to say is it's really personal. Okay, so I'm going to share lots of ideas with you this evening. Some of them will resonate, some won't. Take what you like and leave the rest. It isn't like a case of, you know, eat 5 pieces of fruit and veg and do yoga and cycle to work and you'll be happy. Everybody has different needs and different things. So please tonight, as I talk about different ideas, think about how that might apply to you in your individual situation, and give yourself permission to do it in a way that's meaningful to you, because you're much more likely to do it that way, and it's much more likely to be helpful for your mental health. The other thing I want to mention is that a lot of these ideas that we talk about tonight are going to feel quite simple. It doesn't mean they're necessarily easy to do. So I always say just start like with something small that feels easy, and then build from there. So, you know, we've probably all done it, right? Had that, we've wanted to kind of get our on top of our health, and we've set ourselves a ridiculous target, maybe a January New Year's resolution or something, or giving up something for so many days, and it's really tough, right, when we make a big change like that. So I'd really encourage you with anything to do with your mental health, just start small, start simple, and build from there. Much better to build little habits, and those will grow over time. I wanted to mention this idea of putting the patient first again, because often in medicine there's a narrative that the patient always comes first, absolutely always. And I just want to caveat that slightly with the idea that we are patients as well. Okay, we are human beings just as much as the patients that we're serving are. And we deserve and are entitled to just as much consideration and care and good health as anybody else's. And I think it's really important that if we put ourselves first, as I've shared already, we then actually become better doctors, right? We make fewer mistakes, etc. So please just give yourself permission to give yourself, like you have done today, to be here listening to this webinar, to put yourself first. With that in mind, I'd love it if you're here with us tonight, if you could pop over to the chat box for me and answer this question. I'd really love to hear what you, as an international doctor, find the most challenging. So what's the hardest thing about being an international doctor? I'd love it if you could directly, or to everybody, just what's the hardest thing about being an international doctor? I can share with you what I hear from international doctors all the time, but I'd really love you to think about it for a moment for yourself. What is, or if you are someone that's maybe not yet working internationally, maybe you're thinking about coming to the UK, for example, through Remedium to work here, what is it that you envisage being the hardest thing? What do you think might be most difficult? We'll often hear from international doctors lots and lots of different concerns. So people sharing in the chat already, thank you so much. Worrying about having a poor welcome by the NHS, so not being welcomed. Yeah, and it's so important. A good welcome makes such a difference in the life of a doctor. Okay, you as a doctor, whatever stage of career you're at, you'll already probably have moved from lots of different placements. And if you go to a placement and somebody greets you and says, "Hi, welcome," and they use your first name and they say, "Here's where you sit, and here's your computer, and here's where you can make a cup of tea, and this is the team, and it's lovely to have you here," that's so different to turning up and someone not even really expecting you, not knowing who you are, not being welcoming, you not having a place, not a sense of belonging. Yeah, really, really important. Some more ideas coming in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing. Working in a completely new system without enough support. Yeah, so differences in the system, but also there not being enough support. Not being sure how your career is going to turn out. Yeah, so that lack of kind of predictability or knowing where things might go or how things might unfold in a different environment. Understanding a different culture. Yeah, it's really tough. And culture's made up of so many things, isn't it? It's not just language, it's how our body language, it's how we eat, it's how we interact, it's our day-to-day rules for living. You know, all these things can be quite different in different countries. So really, really, thank you so much for sharing those examples. And I think they are, as you'll see, good examples of some of the most common things that we hear from international doctors around what can be challenging. And tonight I wanted to touch on our top 3 things that I hear most often from international doctors. Number 1, connection and belonging. So we're human beings, and as human beings, we have a deep, deep, deep need to feel connected to other human beings. And we also have this really inherent need to belong. And belonging, when you're in a different culture, can often be a bit confusing. So often we can mistakenly think that to belong, we must fit in, that we must adapt and be the same as. But actually, belonging is about being accepted for who you are within the group. So it's not actually about changing who you are to fit in. It's about feeling like you are accepted for who you are and that you belong. And it's so, so important, okay? And it's one of the most common things we see with international doctors, where they'll feel, they may be a long way from home, in a different culture, and maybe fearful of how they're going to be. Will they be respected? Will they be treated well? Will people accept them? And my top tips for this is to be yourself. Okay, please don't try to be somebody you're not. Just be who you are, because to belong, we need to feel connected to who we are as individuals and feel like we're accepted for who we are, not try and be someone else. And with that in mind, I think it's really, really important to seek out like-minded people and connect with your loved ones. So by that, I mean, you might come to work in a different country like the UK, and you may face some people who are less accepting or less welcoming, but there will absolutely be lots of people who will willingly accept you for who you are and willingly bring you into their lives, welcome you warmly, and love getting to know you and being part of your life and having you part of their life. So I think it's really important that you kind of actively try and seek out those people, okay, so you can belong and feel connected here. So if somebody isn't making you feel welcome, that's not the person to be hanging out with, okay? Move on and find someone, because there's many of us that would love to welcome you and connect with you on a real level. And on the flip side of the connection, not just trying to make connections with people locally where you're now working, but also remembering to keep connected with people back where you have come from, with your loved ones, okay? And some people say it's really, it's difficult, it's not the same doing it like virtually, but it's better than not doing it at all. So I would really say, try if you can to keep regular contact, particularly with the people that make you feel good, right? The people that you can laugh with, the people that you can really be yourself with, like really stay connected. My other top tip is to build a home from home, and this can look different for different people. And what I mean by this is, again, you may love exploring a new culture and eating new foods and trying out new things, but also don't be afraid to kind of hold on to your roots and the things that make you feel like you. So if there are certain foods that you love that you miss from home, gather them around you. If there are certain smells or certain clothes that you're used to wearing, things like that, really important that we allow ourselves to be who we are. So I remember when I was working out in Australia, I really missed the seasons in the UK, right? In the UK, famously awful weather, actually not all the time, but we do have lots of seasonal change, and it can change even within a day. And I really missed that, okay? I was living out in Queensland. It was very near the equator. It was like sunny all day long. All the days seem the same length all year round, and I found that really unsettling. And for some people, they would love that, but for me, I found that quite unsettling. So one day I went to the local video store. We still rented videos back then, or DVDs. I got some cheesy sort of Christmassy DVDs. I took them home with me. I put the air conditioning on full blast, so it was absolutely freezing. It was like 40 degrees outside and like almost minus something inside. And I wrapped up in blankets, got a hot chocolate, and I watched some Christmas movies. Because for me, I needed that sense of, connecting to that, what made me comfortable and what soothed my soul, okay? Our mental health is as much as about our physical health as it is about our soul and our heart and where we belong. So think about the things that you love and surround yourself with those. And one way to do this in a really practical way, if you're starting a new job, maybe you're moving around different places, is to carry with you like at least one item, but possibly two, that kind of can anchor you to who you are in a sense of belonging. So that might be a little photo frame with some loved ones in it that you can carry in your bag and you just pop it out on your desk wherever you land. It could be something as simple as a little plant, again, that you can pop in your bag. Or maybe it's a smell of something, maybe like a lip balm or a moisturizer or something that you can, really connect with that part of you again, and you can carry it with you wherever you go. So I would say be yourself. Make sure you look out for the people around you that are going to accept you for who you are. Connect with your loved ones, particularly the ones that make you happy. And think about how you can build that home from home. The second most common issue that we hear about a lot from international doctors working abroad is practical issues, okay, practical challenges. So things like having to sit for exams, maybe language barriers, maybe difficulty getting visas, navigating a different financial system, navigating different cultures within healthcare systems. So, you know, the way things work basically can be quite challenging and quite different. And one of my top tips for this is to remember that you are not the first international doctor ever to have existed. And there are millions that have gone before you that have overcome these challenges. So it's really, really important that we kind of draw on that great wealth of experience, okay? So ask around or Google, okay, this day and age, internet age, the answer to whatever you're struggling with will be out there somewhere. Just to highlight a few places you might want to have a look. So most Royal Colleges now, if you're working in a particular specialty, will have support resources specifically for international doctors. It's in the UK particularly, it's a much more recognised issue that Royal Colleges and trusts are wanting to support doctors coming from a different background. So do have a look at your Royal College that you might be associated with here in the UK. And even if you're not a member of the college, still have a look at the website, because there may be like videos, there may be guides online of helpful things, helpful tips and things for international doctors when it comes to all sorts of things, exams, finances, etc. Another really good source of information is the British Medical Association, so that's the BMA. I'm going to share a link to their site at the end of the webinar for you, because even if you're not a member of the British Medical Association, there are loads of resources on their website for international doctors. You might also find some useful stuff from your defence union, so the people that are kind of insuring you for your medical practice here. There is financial support for doctors as well. There's links to that on the Joyful Doctor website, where there's about 50 different resources on that website for free that you can access as well. So if you are struggling, please know that there are charities. There are 5 charities in the UK set up specifically to support doctors who are struggling. And international doctors often do fall into that category, because maybe suddenly something happens with your visa that you weren't planning for and it's expensive, or an exam comes up and again or something happens, right? Your car breaks down or something, and suddenly you find yourself really stretched. So please bear in mind that there is financial support available as well. There's also a lot of like peer support around as well, and there's some great Facebook groups. So again, have a little Google, have a little play around on social media. There's lots and lots of groups these days where like-minded doctors are sharing with one another their wisdom and their support for all of those practical things, challenges that happen, because nobody's going to get it like someone who's been there before. Okay, when I went to Australia to work, I talked to the people that had moved out there the year before, the ones that had come from the UK the year before, and they knew it, right? They knew where to go and get a cheap car, they knew how to set up a bank account, they knew all of that stuff. So ask around, and please ask your Remedian helpers as well. They have wonderful, wonderful setup to support you guys in that transition period, in the relocation period. So any questions, if they can't answer it, I'm sure they will be, they will look around for you and try and find an answer. The third really common struggle that we see international doctors facing around their mental health in particular is kind of cultural issues or language issues, and also discrimination. It does happen. I want to give you a message of hope, though, that the vast majority of international doctors working in the UK and in other countries have a really positive and welcoming experience, okay? But there are times when cultural differences can cause distress or stress, okay? It may be that language differences might lead to misunderstandings with patients, may lead to complaints. You may experience direct discrimination or harassment. Now, as I say, it's the vast majority do not, but it can happen. And the message I really want to give you, if you're ever facing that, is that you're not alone, and the issue here is not your fault. Okay, it's absolutely nothing to do with you. It's about the culture, it's about the organization, and it's really important to remember that. Okay, it's not, you're not on your own, and it's not something to do with you. So please get help early. If something has come up, like you face a complaint or a challenging situation and you're not sure what to do about it, please reach out to your friends, your family for support. Reach out to your placement officer. Reach out to your colleagues around you that you're building relationships with. If you're struggling with your mental health in particular, there are services that you can reach out to as well, and I'm going to signpost to those in a minute. I think overall the main message I want to give is, please remember how incredible and how great you are, because you are not only a doctor, which places you in, the top few percent of the world's population in terms of your capabilities, your intelligence, your compassion, your flexibility, your transferable skills. I mean, you are extraordinary just by the very fact that you are a doctor, okay? But the fact that you are willing and able to do that, to be all of those things in an entirely different place, in an entirely different culture, is just adds to your amazingness, okay? So please hold on to that. When, if anything ever does come up and you think, I'm really not, this isn't going great, or I'm struggling here, please don't forget just how much positive stuff you have going for you. In summary of those three main challenges that we've talked about there, so I just wanted to say, please be yourself, okay? It's if somebody isn't accepting of who you are, that's their problem, okay, not yours. You are an extraordinary, wonderful person, and there will be many, many, many more people who would love to welcome you and accept you for who you are. So be yourself. Stay connected, okay? That's into yourself, to what you need. So surround yourself with the things that you love and you know and that comfort you. Stay connected to those you are familiar with and you know. So those loved ones who are living elsewhere. But also try to build those connections with people in your local, like in your new team where you're working, in your local area where you're living, people that kind of get you. And, if it's not a good fit, move on, right? There's plenty of people in the world. The importance is to meet that need for connection, because without that, our mental health tends to suffer. So be yourself, stay connected, and please, 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 if you're struggling, ask for help. On that note, I wanted to share with you a few resources that are available to you as doctors working here in the UK. So 24 hours a day, you can text the letters NHSPH to this number, 85258. That's 24 hours a day, okay? And it's a wonderful, wonderful support system where you can get, within a minute or two, they'll link you up with somebody and you can just text and get emotional support for whatever it is that's going on for you. You can also call if you'd rather speak with somebody, a wonderful service called the Samaritans. And they're free, again, 24 hours a day on this number. When we get to the end of this slide, I will leave it up for a moment in case you want to take a little screenshot of it. And we'll be sharing the slides and the recording after the webinar as well, if you ever need to come back and look at these. So 24 hours a day, you can get text support, you can get phone line support. I really, really encourage you the moment, if you haven't already here working in the UK, got yourself your own general practitioner or GP, family doctor, please, please do. Really important that we, again, treat ourselves as we would any other patient and get the help and support we need for our physical and our mental health. So sign up with a GP. If you're struggling with your mental health at all, there's a free and confidential service that you can refer yourself to as a doctor working in the UK called NHS Practitioner Health. And this is their website. And you can access free support resources off the website, whether you access the service or not. So please do have a look at that website. They have a Practitioner Health. I do some work with them. I have a caseload of doctors that I see for them as a psychiatrist and as a therapist. they're a wonderful service, and they have a group actually for international doctors in particular, because they recognise that this is you have unique challenges, and you benefit from support and of your fellows and your peers. So if you are struggling, that's a wonderful resource. There's lots of free resources on the website, as I say, or you can self-refer to have an assessment and then treatment or support as needed. So completely confidential. The BMA was the one I mentioned earlier, the British Medical Association. So they have a great page of lots of resources for international doctors for advice and support. So just one example of one organisation that is able to offer specific support for doctors. You don't have to be a member to access that. So I'm just going to leave this screen up just for a few more seconds in case you want to take a little screenshot for yourself. These are places you can get support from. The Joyful Doctor website, which I'll give you the address of in a moment, we have, as I say, about 50 support resources too. We're building our international support resources page as well. So if you know of any in your home country or in any other countries, please do let us know, and we'll add it to the list. There is hope if you are struggling. That brings us to time for any questions. So if you have any question on anything we've talked about so far today in the webinar, please do pop them in the chat for me, and I'll be happy to answer those. As I said, if any of you have had to pop away or had any problems with your tech tonight, seeing the slides or anything, we will be sharing a recording of tonight's webinar, so you'll be able to listen back. I'm just going to go back and have a little look through some of the other challenges that you have mentioned while I wait for any questions to come in. So we have someone here sharing a challenge might be getting used to different guidelines and understanding the practice. Yeah, so I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it, how much in our own countries we take for granted, and that's what I felt like when I went to to work in Australia, and suddenly I couldn't put a Venflon in, I couldn't put a cannula in because it was a different, a piece of equipment. And yeah, there might be different guidelines. But I think it's really important to remember that your training as a doctor does not teach you every single bit of information you need to know to be a good doctor. It teaches you how to get the information you need and how to make sense of it. So it's really normal that you might not know every guideline. I mean, even doctors trained in the UK do not know every guideline they're meant to know, okay? We're all constantly in a process of updating our professional knowledge and our skills, okay? So please remember that, just normalize that it's totally okay to spend a bit of time adjusting and getting used to the new guidelines and finding them and asking people for them, and and which ones do they follow like to the letter, and which ones can you be a bit more flexible with, and that all comes with time and will vary from place to place as well. Even just like in any country, practice will vary slightly from hospital to hospital or clinic to clinic. So give yourself permission to take your time to adjust to the new system. Don't expect yourself to hit the ground running on day one and be able to do everything really super quickly. I tend to advise my international doctors that I see who are struggling to give themselves a few months to really settle in, okay? If you know your ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation, then you're going to be okay. Everything else except CPR can wait. Okay, a patient can wait while you look up a guideline or go and ask somebody. That's absolutely okay. Nobody is expecting you to know every single thing about everything in medicine. It'd be impossible. Okay, none of us can do that. And you will be surprised how quickly you pick these things up as well. And the ones you use all the time will just become normal very quickly. And the ones you don't need access to very often, again, most of us would have to look that up, okay, even if it is in our own country of practice. Any other questions? Please do feel free to pop them in the chat. Be lovely to be able to help you if you've got any particular questions. John just saying, thank you for an amazing lecture. That's really kind, thank you. Totally agree. I started to be more relaxed and less stressed when I started to just be myself. Oh, thank you for saying that, because I when you become an expert in something in medicine, there's still a pressure, right, to know all the right answers, and for it to somehow be really complex, or something really that had to take me years to learn. And actually, a lot of what makes us well, or keeps us well as doctors, is actually very, very simple. And it has, I suppose, taken me quite a while to really realize that and own that. But I really felt that was an important message to get across, because we put ourselves under so much pressure as doctors to behave a certain way, to look a certain way, to speak a certain way. And actually, we lose sight sometimes of the fact that we are generally really nice people who are, reasonable, and we're not knowingly going to want to do something wrong. And it's okay maybe just to relax a bit and just to be who we are, because when we are our true selves, we actually bring, I think we bring a bit extra to our practice as doctors. We connect with our patients better. We are more relaxed. We're more likely, as I say, to make less mistakes, etc. So, I think it's really important. Someone else sharing there, thank you for saying this. Not many people talk about it, thinking it's not professional enough, and thinking that you have to be a perfect human. And it's really important that we need to know our limitations. Yeah, absolutely. None of us are an encyclopedia. I mean, it used to be, say, 100 years ago, maybe 150, you could pretty much learn all of medicine because it all kind of fitted into one or two textbooks, or you could learn it from the masters when you went to medical school. It was kind of, but now, since the information age, it's absolutely impossible to know it all. So really becoming a doctor now is much more about learning how to take the new information in, and how to rationalize, and how to prioritize, and how to work out what's good and what's not. And so those skills you will have from having trained as a doctor will help you as an international doctor working in another place. So have trust in that. Someone else sharing here, thank you for an informative and joyful talk. That's my pleasure. My question is how to feel better from perfectionism. Great question. So yeah, perfectionism is very common amongst doctors. We have very, very high standards for ourselves and for others as well. And in some way, respect, it's something that is very positive and has actually helped a lot of us to get to where we are, right? A lot of our perfectionism drives us to work hard, to do well, to strive to be the best that we can be, to provide an excellent standard of care. And those are all wonderful things. So I don't think we should kind of dismiss our perfectionism as being all bad. I think it's important that we thank it for where it has brought us and the positive sides of it. But I think it's also about recognizing it has some downsides. So perfectionism can lead you to excessively worry about stuff. It can lead you to feel very anxious. It can lead you to spend a lot of time doing things and checking things, because it's like, I have to make sure it's right. I have to make sure it's perfect. And that can mean that you're then not very effective and efficient. So I think my top tip for perfectionism is to challenge it gently and to start small. Do you remember I shared before that these ideas are quite simple, but they're not necessarily easy. So to challenge your perfectionism, I often will get doctors to deliberately put a spelling mistake in their notes, for example. Now, I wouldn't do that on anything that was clinically significant. So, I wouldn't suggest you to put the wrong spelling on a drug name, for example, because that would be dangerous. But a little spelling mistake somewhere that might just challenge your perfectionism, but wouldn't necessarily have any major outcome or problems. Something like that is just a little example, but deliberately doing something not perfectly really, really helps to challenge perfectionism. And if you start with something really small like that, it will just loosen off the grip that perfectionism has on you. You might feel quite anxious doing it. I've worked with a lot of doctors to do this, and they can feel awful, like sending off a letter that's got the wrong spelling of this or that in it. It doesn't, again, it's not clinically going to be dangerous, but it's just challenging that idea that it has to be perfect. So when we act in a way that isn't perfect, and we realize that the world doesn't end, the sky doesn't fall down, we don't get into trouble, that's when it starts to loosen up a bit. So you can have a bit of fun with it. And I think if you're struggling with it on a level where it's causing you to run late because you're late at work checking things all the time, or you're spending forever writing your letters or your notes because they have to be perfect, that's a really good time to come forward and get some help. So it's like something like the NHS Practitioner Health Service. Come and have a chat with someone like me. We can talk it through. We can have a think, is this part of a mental health problem like OCD, for example, or is this just that you've got a little bit low or a bit anxious, and the perfectionism's just got a little bit out of control temporarily? And we can have a think about what might be going on underneath it and think about ways to help you loosen that off a bit. I hope that made sense. Another question coming in: how to manage situations of bullying? Yeah, so you know what, the NHS does have, for reasonable rates of bullying and harassment. It happens as with any organisation in the world, but there are wonderful services and support mechanisms in place as well, because it's recognised as an issue. So there will be people at your local trust where you're working that are designated to support people going through something like this. Remedium themselves, I'm sure, would be happy to hear from you if you were struggling, and they could try to find out what your support services might be in your local area. If it's affecting your mental health, which bullying and harassment often does, if it's making you feel down, if it's making you feel isolated, anxious, traumatized, any of those things, come again to see your GP or come to something like Practitioner Health to get support, because these things are always things that will be helped if you can connect with kind other people and talk them through. Yeah, bullying again is not about you, as it can feel very, very personal, but it isn't about the person being bullied, it's about the bully. Yeah, and it's something that you can get help with if you speak about it with someone else. Okay, so please do come forward if it's something that affects you. Talk to somebody. There will be people that can help you. Any tips on how to connect better as an introvert? Especially when often people are considered to be a better doctor or a more competent doctor if they are extroverted. Yeah, great question. And often one that I hear from international doctors, because often culturally doctors can feel more comfortable interacting with others in different ways. So what do I mean by that? So some doctors in certain countries will be much more extroverted, much more outgoing, much more outspoken, seemingly very confident. Doctors from other countries might come across very much more quiet, not so outspoken, more reverent almost. Like we see a lot of difference in the culture around how people address one another, for example, whether it's by their first name, by their last name, by their title, depending on which country you may have come from and what your normal, what your training was like. So very, very common to find that, find yourself working in another place where people expect you to be something you're not. And I think it's, again, really important that you hold on to the fact that it's absolutely okay to be an introvert or an extrovert. Okay, they're both okay. And it's about finding belonging and acceptance as you are. So maybe trying, if you can, to speak with the people in your immediate team and just sharing with them, just being open and saying, I'm really aware that I tend to be quite quiet, and that's not a reflection of how interested I am in the work or how, that I don't have ideas. It's just that I generally am a little bit more introverted. So, and maybe if you can, coming up with ways that you could potentially show your skills and contribute in different ways that you feel more comfortable. So it might be that you prefer to drop ideas in an email to your whatever, your consultant or your team member. It might be that you prefer to be involved in a project, like an audit or a research project that's just one or two people. So you're in a small group. So go back to who you are accept who you are. It's wonderful. Okay, there's nothing wrong with you. And think, how could I meet the need of this service or this job in a way that honors my way of being? Because there's more than one way to be a good doctor. Okay, and it takes all of us to make a good workforce. It takes some that are outspoken and some that are quieter. Okay, you will have strengths in different areas. We all do. So just try and think, how can I, if there's a box that needs to be ticked, like you need to give a presentation, or think, how could I do this in a way that honors me and how I approach things? Okay, because just because you have a belief that you need to be more something doesn't mean that's true. Actually, I do believe that medicine is a wide enough field that we can all find our place, and we can be comfortable and happy and joyful if we can seek out those people that will, as I say, accept us for who we are. As we're drawing to a close, it'd be really, really lovely if you could leave us some feedback for this webinar. And if you're watching back on the recording, please do still use this link. It will still be working. So you can scan this QR code and just leave us some feedback on this webinar. We really appreciate your honest feedback, because it helps us to help more doctors. And tonight's webinar, you can claim 1 hour of CPD for having listened and been here. You don't need to have a certificate for that. You can just self-certify with the name and the title of the webinar, and just say, or do a couple of reflective lines on it. If you do need a certificate for any particular reason, you can contact the guys at Remedium. We've provided them with a template certificate. So if you do need one, you can get in touch with Remedium, and they will send one out for you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Walker. I think we can all agree that it's always beneficial to talk about these things, even if you know that these resources are available to you. Never hurts to listen to someone else's experience. So thank you very much for that. I think everyone finds that very helpful. So yes, as Dr. Walker said, if you do need to claim CPD credit with a certificate, please get in touch with us and we can sort that out for you. We also will be sending out the recording of this webinar along with a engagement survey in the upcoming days. But immediately after this, we will be sharing a survey to registries for this event, and your feedback is very welcome. So please do take the time. It won't take longer than a couple of minutes. Well, yeah, that's it. I think thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you so much, Nadia, and thank you to everybody who's been here and engaged so openly and wonderfully in the chat. And to those watching back, please do be in touch. If you've got any questions or anything at all, you can contact me, Caroline Walker, through the email address teamjoy@joyfuldoctor.com, and our website is www.joyfuldoctor.com. As I say, there's lots and lots of free resources on there as well. So please do be in touch. We love to hear from you, and take care. And thank you to those listening back on the recording. Goodbye.